All right, guys. So here are your terms for today. So we should have finished off with Pearl Harbor, right? Pretty happy, sir. Oh, do I talk about Rosie the Riveter already? I think we've got these. Okay, all right. Hey, I'll give you guys some time here. Work on these terms, which should have a few little look. Yeah. Anyway, Rosie the Riveter, rationing, Victory Guards, War Production Board, WAC. Today we're going to talk about the Homefront. I do have a video for you. I have another assignment for you too. Oh yeah. And that's gonna be due Friday though, right? So it won't be due tomorrow, I'll be due Friday. Kind of get back to the swing of things.
I'm already in the swing. I don't think we.
Are you? Well, then I guess we can make it due tomorrow.
No,
That's what you said.
No,
You said it.
we don't need another assignment.
Yeah, okay.
That was like 23 seconds.
Going up the area on the red motor man said, I'm not the Easter, but no, I have the Easter. That's the kind of. They don't call it.
And if I didn't trip out a second, I probably would. No, I agree. That's not what I just said. Almost. That's the way you look.
All right, so since we have these terms, let's go over it real quick. Rosie the Riveter. What do we have for Rosie the Riveter? Huh? Eli, do you have your hand up?
Oh.
You can find her iPad. What? They couldn't pay it. Probably dead. Wow. Well then. Okay, Jason, go ahead. Yes, good. So as World War II begins, well, we all know in World War I, same thing, right? We got to send our men over to fight in this war. Not just over in the European theater, but in the Pacific theater. So women's role really increased in society. And Rosie the Riveter is like a symbol. Okay, it's not just one person, right? It wasn't just one lady, one woman named Rosie the Riveter. Right, this was every woman that was a part of the war effort. And when it comes to being a Rosie the Riveter, a riveter is just like putting metal together. So working in the production lines in order to produce as many military supplies as possible. Right. When it comes to sewing uniforms, right? Increasing your roles on the farm on the farm fields. There's many jobs, many opportunities here for women to step up. And if they partook in any type of these activities, they're considered a Rosie the Riveter. Right. I know I talked about my grandmother. She was in her teens, right around the time of World War II, and she used to sew up parachutes in our local town. So that was neat. So she was technically considered a Rosie the Riveter. So anyway, again, not just one person. It's like a symbol. This is a kind of a means of propaganda. Try to promote the war effort here at home. All right, rationing. We already mentioned about rationing already. What is rationing? What is rationing? Go ahead, Luna. Yeah, good, right? So you got to save as many resources as possible for the war effort. And when it comes to scrap metal, when it comes to rubber on old tires, any type of materials needed for the war, they would gather together at community centers, a lot of times at schools, to bring these items in, right? And then they would send them off to help with the conflict. Also here at home for, civilians, right? People were given ration cards of what they can and even can't buy at the grocery store. So these were items that were already kind of pre-selected in the newspaper and even cards that were given to people. And it was just telling them what they could buy at the grocery store. And the other items they'd save for obviously their troops. So with rationing, this was a way to try to save as many resources as possible, even food, right, and prepare for the war. All right, victory gardens, right? In other words, well, we already talked about victory gardens, propaganda, World War One. But in other words, this is for people to try to be a little bit more self-sufficient, right? Live off the land and their own growth, right? So when it comes to producing their own food and their own meals, okay? And a lot of this larger farms that are producing goods and materials, crops, they would send these materials overseas. So yeah, if you have your own garden at your house, great. And then try to obviously make sure you can save every type of food item that you produce. Okay, so in other words, be more self-sufficient here at home. And try to save as all the food as possible. Don't waste it, don't throw it out. A lot of propaganda pieces were driven around victory gardens. I think in World War One, I showed you the one, it was kind of like a Lady Liberty going around throwing seeds in a farm field. You guys remember that? Yeah. Okay. Or production board. So we'll talk about this today. And this is a government agency created during wartime in order to produce as many military supplies as possible. All right. One problem here, though, in the United States through the 1930s, leading up in here in 1941, as we know, Pearl Harbor happens. Okay, what was our manufacturing open? Or our businesses open? What were we going through? What were we going through? Someone else. What phase here were we going through? Ariel, what were we going through at the time of the 1930s? It wasn't good. Yeah, the Great Depression. So a lot of our production was shut down, right? We weren't producing materials, we weren't producing goods. And if we were, it was peacetime products, right? So now I have to shift that transition. All right, today I'm gonna focus on Ford Motor Companies and what they did in order to try to prepare for the conflict. And then WAC, what do you have for WAC? Hopefully you typed in like World War II behind it, because I don't know what would bring up for you. Naomi, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, good. And what's that all about? Or is
They provided support to the army on that.
Yeah, good. So non-combat position. So you think about communication, right? That's a huge thing in order to try to relay information back and forth. When it comes to obviously healthcare, right? When it comes to nursing, trying to get these soldiers back up on their feet. When it comes to obviously just even preparing food. So as these supply lines are becoming lengthened, as we take over parts of land in Europe and out in the Pacific, as we're expanding our sphere of influence, well, one of the main things after you take land, and especially at Pacific here, is as you island hop your way, you gotta solidify these supply lines, right? You gotta strengthen them. And for women here, their roles were preparing food, producing food, and again, trying to get these soldiers that may have fell on the battlefield to try to get them back up on the field. So communication, again, a big part of how we're going to make our way across the Pacific, especially relaying information back and forth, but over in Europe too. All right, here we go. So we're going to start on. We're going to start off here with this new presentation. You guys can find this in modules, okay? And this is America Enters the War. So it's a second presentation. Anyway, leading up to this point, up to 1941, it looks like the Axis powers are just having their way. All right, it looks like they are dominating the battlefield in Europe with the Nazis, who we talked about. Okay, real quick, let's just review what we went over so far with Germany and their expansion. What do we know so far with them? All right, what do we know? Where did we leave off? Remember, Jason? Yes, good job, right? So as they expanded, they went north, right? Well, we talked about the invasion of Poland. That's what kicked off the war, right? And what tactic did they use again to really advance far into Europe, right? Blitzkrieg, good job, meaning lightning warfare. And they went to the northern countries, which we talked about, Denmark, right? Norway, Sweden, right? Those areas. And then they invaded France, which, how long did it take for Germany to take over France? Remember here? Audrina?
30.
Yeah, right. A little bit over a month. That was it. And they took over France. Remember, I was showing you pictures of how Hitler's propagandizing this whole invasion, this takeover. I was taking pictures in front of the Eiffel Tower and one in the tomb of Napoleon. It was unbelievable, right? And how do you invade France? Where do you go? You go through that Maginot Line, did he take them on headstrong? Audrina? Yes, the Ardennes Forest, good job, good, good. Right, as they invaded France, they took them over with ease. Anyway, what about Great Britain? Did they have a planned invasion for Great Britain, the island of England? What we got? Did they do it? Did they have an invasion? What happened here? Go ahead.
They did have operations planned, but they didn't do it.
Yes, right, because it wasn't feasible. So how did they try to force Great Britain to surrender? And this was called something. This was over close to a year long, and he's bombing runs. What was this called? Blake. The Blitz. Yeah, good job. And did Great Britain surrender? No, they didn't, right? They held on. They held on by a thread. And then we all know that the United States really couldn't help out too much, right? We were just, well, we're restricted, right? Our hands were cuffed. And what was that called? Those acts that prevented us from getting involved in the World War II. Peyton? Yeah, the Neutrality Acts. Good job. And then towards, well, the 1940s, we see the Lend-Lease Act, which is kind of helping us out here. Right? And then we finally finished off with what event which brought us into World War II? Elena? Pearl Harbor, good job. What's the date? Date here, Pearl Harbor, Calvin.
So, 1941.
Yes, good job, good. All right, yeah, and then right before Easter, we talked about the perspectives of Pearl Harbor. Hopefully you guys found that interesting. Again, we had different viewpoints of people that were at Pearl Harbor. And I think I already graded that. Yeah, that assignment's already in. Your map, that's what I was looking at, your Pacific map. Make sure you have that assignment turned in. Didn't turn it in over or before break or over break. Turn it in now. All right, I'm gonna grade that here today. So that should have been enough time. We even went over it. There should be no excuse. All right, here we go. So as we're talking about the war here, right? It looks like again the Axis powers are on the hunt, right? It looks like their expansion is growing and growing and growing, not just in Europe, but over in Asia. And real quick, after Pearl Harbor, how long was our Pacific fleet wiped out for? How long? Go ahead, Chase.
Happy year.
Yeah, it's a happy year. So 6 months. Anyway, that gives the opportunity for Japan to advance, right? To expand even more out of the Pacific. And we're gonna take our lumps here early on, which we're gonna talk about more tomorrow. All right, so when it comes down to it, well, we weren't prepared whatsoever, right? When it came to the United States' ability to mobilize and militarize, well, we weren't ready. We did have a Selective Service Act though, before we were involved in the war, which kind of goes to show that we're thinking about getting involved here sooner or later. But as we're trying to get things moving, it takes some time. Again, we're going through a Great Depression, right? A lot of our factories, a lot of our industries were shut down. The morale of the people just wasn't there, right? But after an event like Pearl Harbor, that brought the whole country together, right? It's one of those things that it's unfortunate after an event like this that happens, right? It's unfortunate that it takes an event like this to happen in order to try to unite the United States. Again, you got to imagine too, as you can see here, this slide talks a lot about the diversity here in America, which is our greatest asset, right? How we can bond together, right? Of all different races, all different ethnicities, cultures, and we come together for a common cause. As we got attacked at Pearl Harbor, this brought the whole country together, right? Again, it's kind of unfortunate to think an event like Pearl Harbor, and then you can kind of think in recent, right, with 9/11, right? An event like that brings us together. Why can't we just unite this whole time, right? Why can't we put our differences to the side? Anyway, at the time, you gotta imagine too, the Jim Crow laws in the South were still in place. And there's still segregation in the South. So for a lot of Americans, right, in this case, African Americans, they're segregated from many public places, right? When it comes to schools, libraries, when you think about even restaurants, parks, you name it, right? There's still a lot of division. But as the war starts, okay, we put our differences to the side and we unite, we come together. Okay, so as you can see here, 1 million African Americans joined the war effort. And we'll talk about a group here towards the midway point of the war, for us anyway, the Tuskegee Airmen. You guys ever hear the Tuskegee Airmen before? Naomi, you have? Okay, so the Red Tails. There's a movie out on Disney Plus, I think it's called. Yeah, it's called The Red Tails. So if you guys get a chance, maybe check it out. But there's a lot of information about the Tuskegee Airmen. So if you guys get a chance, check it out. 300,000 Mexican Americans, 25,000 Native Americans. You guys ever hear of the Navajo code talkers? Now, we'll talk about them towards the end of the war here. But as we're making our way across the Pacific, you gotta imagine, everybody's listening, right? Even obviously Japan. And we had to find a way in order to try to cover up our codes, right? Our information, our radio broadcasts across the Pacific Ocean. And one way we did it was using this native language that's been around even before America, right? And only a few people know how to speak it. And we utilize this Navajo language in order to try to cover up our language and cover up our plans or strategies, right? And these Navajo code talkers would be designed to a lot of squadrons, a lot of groups as we're making our way across the Pacific. And the Japanese did not break it, right? They allowed them to try to do it even after the war. So after the war's over, right? They said, hey, you know what? Try to break it if you can. It took them all the way up until the 1960s to do it, right? It just goes to show again how unique, how rare, right, this language is. So we'll talk more about that towards the end here of this island hopping strategy. And then 350,000 women. So again, symbol here for women that were joining the war after. What do they call? Madison? I thought that was a hand. What are they called? There's an R. Oh, boy. Jeez. You okay? Still sleeping from Easter break. What about you, Maddie Leitzel? Yes, Rosie the Riveter. What are you doing? What are you doing? All right, so in the WAC, like I mentioned, non-combat rules for women. A lot of it communication. A lot of it is, again, when it comes to healthcare and aiding men back up on their feet on the battlefield. So again, that's huge. So the War Production Board starts to convert peacetime industries into wartime industries. Again, a lot of our factories, a lot of our industries were shut down. We weren't producing much of anything during the Great Depression, right? And when you guys get down the line and talk about the Great Depression in American history too, with Mr. Shutt down the line here, right? He'll mention a lot about these agencies that were created by FDR in order to try to build back communities, in order to try to try to give people jobs during this hard time of the Depression. All right, they're government funded jobs through the New Deal. Well, that's great and all, but it's not really doing a whole lot to get us out of the Depression. But as World War II begins, well, instantly, right, that Great Depression comes to a close. Our factories open up and we start to produce goods and materials, a lot of it for the war effort. Again, for other countries too. The Lend-Lease Act helped, sure, but as we fully get involved, right, this is what officially ends the Great Depression. Right, a lot of people look at it and say, hey, did the New Deal, right, did that really help us get out of the Great Depression? Sure. Some say it actually did a little bit worse, put us in the Depression a little bit more, because government's spending money like crazy. But, well, World War II is that official reason why we get out of the Depression. Anyway, with the War Production Board, this shifts and adjusts industries to produce wartime products. One of the biggest ones was Ford Motor Company, right? You guys ever see the movie Ford versus Ferrari? It's more of a racing movie. Anybody? No? You guys have? Okay. They talk a little bit about the production of these B-24 bombers. I mean, it's not just that movie. There's many, many others. But as you can see here, they pumped out one B-24 bomber per hour. It was amazing, right? So when you think about our sheer production alone, right, that's what's going to win us this conflict. That's what's going to win us this war, right? As we're producing as many goods as possible, the other countries around the world just couldn't do it. Again, it didn't happen overnight, right? This takes about a year and a half, 2 years even, to get to full production. And again, we're in a Great Depression. We're at war. The one thing that keeps us safe is that we got these oceans separating us. Yeah, after the devastation of Pearl Harbor, which you can see here, and obviously with Hawaii at the very far right in the window there on the map. But we got still a big chunk of water here to get to until you get to continental United States. So we're not getting bombed, we're not getting invaded, right? Which allows us to continue to produce as many goods as possible. And even through this Great Depression, we're still the largest industrial power in the world. So overall, that's again, it's going to win us this war. Our sheer production alone. All right, so women take jobs, right? Obviously, as the men are going to fight, and we see them as Rosie the Riveters. Right, Madison? You ever see this propaganda piece? You should have when you looked up the vocabulary. Okay, good. All right. We can do it too. Let's see it. Go ahead, Jenna. You hit triple. Whoa, nice, nice. All right, so fighting in the Pacific, we're gonna end there, okay? We're gonna end there. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about, the Pacific tomorrow. Okay, I would have mentioned a little bit about some of the lumps we take early on. And then, well, some pretty sad stories actually, on American perspective, when it comes to the Battle of the Philippines. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll even mention about the Doolittle raids. So I think you guys will, maybe you never heard of it, but we'll talk about the Doolittle raids tomorrow. All right, I'm gonna put out your assignment. It's about the home front. You get to learn more about Rosie the Riveter, right, Madison? Okay, great. All right, so here's your assignment, guys. All I want you to do is, well, there's these attachments here that you guys will find. You guys can create a separate Google Doc. I'd recommend doing that, right? Create a separate Google Doc and answer these questions. So you can just put your answer. Now answer in detail. I don't want to see you just slap down one word. Okay, so once you click on the attachments, you can see them here. Here's what they look like. So as you can read through the section, okay, there's questions that are attached. You guys can just put the numbers right next to it, right, and then answer it in a Google Doc. Okay, and then there's another one about the War Production Board. So there's other questions that are attached. Okay. All right. So you can just put like document 1 questions and then list, number it, answer it. Then you can go to document 2 questions, number it, answer it, and then document 3. Okay. You guys got it? All right. Perfect. Perfect. Wyatt, you need an iPad. Come here. Yep. Come here. The passcode is on the back. Just make sure you sign out when you're done and bring it back. Yep. All right, there you go. Oh, before we get there, does someone want to give the map a whirl up front? Ariel? Okay, great. Hey, I'm not giving you a pen either.